biggest influence in the demand for labour is the idea of productivity. Okay, so how productive, how good are the labour resources at their job? So let's imagine you are the boss of McDonald's and you're having to hire workers, labour, and you're trying to figure out which ones to hire. So you're going to make a decision about how many burgers per hour each one can make. And if they can make more, then you're likely to hire that person because they are more productive, okay? They're more able to produce more burgers, which means you're more able to sell burgers, etc. All right? We tend to suggest that in the center of a city, those resources tend to be more productive, right? So out in the rural areas, not as productive perhaps, but in the middle of the city, that's where things tend to be more productive. So therefore, businesses that are there tend to be able to attract more labour because they're in the centre of the city, all right? Okay, now, let's move on from there. Now, here's your first task. Now, all the way back at the start of the course, like, a long time ago, feels like a really long time ago now, but it isn't that long, right? We learned about the difference between public businesses and private businesses, okay? So we talked about a public sector and a private sector. And we said that the businesses that were in the two were different, right? And therefore they might have different objectives, they might have different costs, etc. So what I'm going to want you to do next is this. Now it's going to appear very soon in the Nearpod. Here it comes. Very soon. It'll appear right. Here it is. Now, this is a collaboration board. And what I'd like you to do is it's a pin board, okay? So anywhere you type on here, you hit space, right, or enter, and it's going to post it as a pin on the notice board, right? So what I'm wanting you to do is to try and define public businesses, define private businesses, and then give real-life examples of them. That's all I want you to do. And it will then appear as like a post-it note here. And you'll be able to see everybody else's posts, and you'll be able to perhaps like them as well, because there's a little wee heart button that you can use to like their post. All right, you've got about 30-odd seconds. Ready? Go. If you need to, feel free to use Dr. Google. Good work there, Hom. Okay, we're talking about listing on the stock market. All right. Okay, that's an idea. Yeah, okay. Yes, you can say that. One of the things that we talk about is called a publicly listed company. So that's what Dr. Google is pulling out for you, is that there are publicly listed companies, which means they're listed on the stock market. Oh yeah, you're on the right path there, Abu. Okay, you're getting there. What I'm thinking about is ownership, right? As in who owns the business. So I'm thinking about when you're using the term public business, you're talking public sector business. And when you're talking private business, you're talking private sector business. And who owns those two? Have a go. Give you a bit more time. There was a message that popped up. No worries, Iman. No worries. Jump into the Nearpod and have a go. Good to see you. I say see you, you know, obviously virtually. Oh, well done, Hong. Absolutely right. That's exactly what I'm after. And I'm going to give you a heart for that one. I think I can. Yes, because that's a really good point. That's exactly what I'm after. The idea that a public sector business is one that is owned and run by government. Okay? So it could be the local government, doesn't have to be the central government. But if you're thinking Malaysia, I think the water supply is run by the local government. I think, my understanding. You might know better than I. So any business that's actually being run by the government, whether that's the local government or the central government, is going to be classified as a public sector business. So therefore, the opposite of that, any business that is run by, as correctly pointed out, private individuals, any of those businesses are going to be classified as private sector businesses. And that's all you need. You know? It's that idea about being able to identify. And the reason why I've included it here is because of this very thing, is that you do tend to get confused between a public sector business and a publicly listed business. Now, it's unfortunate that they're using the word public in both, but that's kind of how economics does things. Yeah, that's, to use street slang, that's how we roll. Yeah, sometimes we use the same word in different contexts, and it might actually mean different things. Right? Yes, okay. All right. So we're still talking about the stock market. That's okay. That's absolutely okay. What I'm wanting you to get to, again, is that idea that the public sector is owned and run by the government. So a public sector business is owned and run by the government, and the private sector is going to be owned and run by private sector individuals like you. You know, you might set up your own business. Yeah, why not? Yeah, apparently everybody's doing it now. Yes, you've said what about? Yes, Malaysian Airlines. That's a really good question. Well done. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yep, that's absolutely right. And Malaysian Airlines, and I mean, yeah, good question. What is it considered to be? Malaysian airlines in general, there's a thing that some governments around the world do, is that they tend to be very patriotic towards airlines. Somehow airlines tend to be a symbol of patriotism or nationalism. Nationalism, is that a word? Anyway, patriotism. So, you know, Singapore Airlines, Air Malaysia, Air New Zealand, right? They are seen as symbols of the country, and because they fly around the world, quite often governments will be involved in the running of them. All right, so a few years ago, and I say a few years ago, I am talking decades ago, Air New Zealand ran out of money, the airline where I'm from, okay? And so the government was debating whether it was going to put the money up for the airline. It was looking at selling the airline off completely. And one of the companies that was interested in buying it was Singapore Airlines. Turned out the government decided it was going to put up the money for it, and it spent about $1 billion New Zealand dollars refitting the airline and paying what needed to be done, you know, which was very expensive. But the reason why they did it is because that same idea that it's a very patriotic view. It's the symbol, the imagery of the country. So Air Malaysia is more likely to be classified as a public business with a private component. Ooh, all right. So it's not as straightforward as public and private, as you correctly pointed out. Yeah. And governments will do that. the government will want to take control of it, and they have here in Malaysia, and in New Zealand, the government controls it, but they will allow elements of the private sector in there in order to, things like financing. Where do you find the money, right? And the government doesn't want to have to keep putting the money up, so sometimes they will ask the private sector to put money up, but then they need to take a stake, if you will, and part of the ownership then might go to them. So you would consider Malaysian Airlines, to cut a long story short, to be a public business with a private component. Well done, team. Yes, Harvey, well done. Public banks, yes. Good idea. Yeah, okay. Yeah, IKEA is a really interesting company. I don't know that any of you picked it for your business case studies. I don't think you did. But IKEA is, I mean, you're probably very familiar with IKEA. There's one here, right? And it is the world's largest private company that is not listed on the stock market. It has never, ever been listed on the stock market, which is kind of weird when you think about it. And if you've traveled and seen IKEAs in different parts of the world, that's where it is. That's where it's at, right? So IKEA is also owned more or less, like we're private individuals, but more or less by one family, okay? And they make all the decisions about it. The other really interesting thing about IKEA is that they are officially a non-profit business. Technically, IKEA make zero profits. What they do is any profits that they make, they reinvest back into their business, and they classify that as research funding, research investment. So new ways to build furniture. You know? So it is quite an interesting case study, IKEA. You know? And Lego as well is a fascinating company as well. One of the quirky things about Lego, in case you're unaware, is that Lego is the company that makes more car tires than any other business in the world. Because, you know, all the little Lego cars, they all got little car tires. So they make more car tires than any other business in the world. They are the world's leading manufacturers of car tires. And it's Lego. It's quite fun, I find. Right. Now, here's your next challenge. Again, thinking all the way back, right to the start of the course, we talked about the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. And again, we said that there were going to be some businesses who were primary sector businesses, other businesses that were going to be secondary sector businesses, and other businesses that we said were going to be tertiary sector businesses. So, here's what I'd like you to do. All of a sudden, in Nearpod, there's going to be a question arising. It's going to be another shared board. I like them now. I think they're quite fun. So again, you're going to type an answer in here, and then it's going to appear as a post-it note up there. And the plan is that you are going to explain the difference between primary, secondary, and tertiary businesses, and maybe come up with an example or two. That would be really good. All right, ready? Go. Coming up with examples of primary and secondary businesses and what they mean. Very good. Well done, Abu. Absolutely right. Well done. If I can give you a little heart for that. See. I think the heart thing was quite a cool thing. There you go. You can. Primary sector deals with extracting. Yes, good. Well done. Yeah, good point. Tertiary sector is possibly a bit more than that as well. Right? There's a little bit more that it does than just distribution. But you are on the right path there, Lishan. Well done. Rock stars, the lot of you. I quite like the pinboard idea. I think it looks really good visually. Wait for a couple more. Primary is acquiring new materials. Yes, raw materials. Well done. Absolutely right. There we go. Secondary, primary sector. Yes. Good. Well done. Very good, Lancelot. The secondary is more than just the metalworking one, but yes, absolutely right. Say primary businesses grow goods and extracts materials from the land. Yes, well done. All good. And examples. Fantastic. Yeah, excellent. Think of an example of a tertiary-based business. Good work, Arjuna. Well done. Fantastic. Good work, Kane. Yes, indeed. They are examples of primary sector businesses. Well done. So that's the right angle. Just put it on that way. Trying to work out how to do a tweet of the answers that you're posting. They're very good. We used to go to conferences when we were in New Zealand, and you'd go to the conference and people would be live tweeting all the time. You would then see these tweets coming up all the time. It was quite a cool thing. Defining theory. Right, so if you are on the Twitter, you will see that I have just posted your answers into the Twitter sphere. I think that's what we call it. Well done, rock stars. Good work, Iman. Yes, Emma, good examples. Yes, you'd say the cinema as well. Yeah. Book publishers, yeah, okay. Yes, it does. Well done. That's really good, huh? Now, what you've done there is you have illustrated the idea of interdependence, how the primary sector is working with, in conjunction with the secondary sector, which is working in conjunction with the tertiary sector. So they're all relying on each other in order to get what they need. Yeah. Well done, team. Very pleased. Great job. Now, here's where we were at before. When we're talking about businesses, we can classify them, we can put them into groups. So how can you classify businesses? Well, activity, so whether it's primary, secondary, tertiary, okay, there perhaps. By legal structure, we're going to spend a little bit of time on that a little bit later, not today, but by size. Now, size is a quirky thing because what the examiner is actually going to ask you to do is the examiner is going to ask you to look at businesses and big businesses, small businesses, and it's going to ask you questions along the lines of, why is it good for that business to be big, right? Or why is it better for the business to be small? What are the advantages to the business being bigger? What are the advantages to the business being smaller? And they're talking about the size of the business. So in economics, we say there are some advantages and some disadvantages to being big as a business, and some advantages and disadvantages to being small as a business. Yeah. So if you have a look, say, at the NBA at the moment, you've got a lot of big men in the NBA, but you've also got some smaller men in the NBA. Average height in the NBA is about 6'2", okay, but there are some who are well over 7 foot. So the ones who are around the 6 foot mark, right, they are ones who are perhaps, they might be a bit quicker, right, they might be more able to respond maybe, right, and so therefore maybe sometimes being a smaller business means you're more able to respond, you're quicker to make your decisions. That's sort of an idea. So we're going to come up with those sorts of reasons as to why a business might want to be bigger, also why they might want to be smaller. But we need to have a look at what they mean by big and small. Okay? So it's not quite as obvious as it first sounds, because it could be to do with this idea here, which is called turnover. And it's not about the apples in McDonald's, apple turnover. Yeah. In this case, it's about the sales that they make. How many sales, how many products do they actually sell? And you might have seen in the news the other day that Apple has now overtaken all of the other rivals and is now the #1 seller of smartphones in the world. Right? It was that before, and then it lost that position to other companies, but it's now got that back again. So turnover is about how many sales, right, they make. So it could be that they're large, they're medium, or they're small, depending again on the volume of sales. Then the next measure of size could be about how many employees do they have, right? So you might be quite surprised. You might think to yourself, oh, I hadn't thought of that as a measure of size, but how many teachers are there at Nexus? Yeah? How many teachers are there in all of Taylor's? Yeah? And that gives you an idea of the size and the scale, right, that as an education group we are dealing with. Yeah. So small, medium, or large. It gives you an understanding about how big those businesses can be. The amount of capital employed. And that's a difficult one to try and figure out. But what they're saying is how much of their money in their accounts are they using to invest in capital goods. Remember, you made the decision, not necessarily labour, but capital. So it might be that they've built ginormous big factories. Yeah, so that's quite a lot of capital goods. Yeah? And there was a business just the other day, I think it's a DIY warehouse in Malaysia. I think that's what they're called. They've got a picture of a little hammer. It's their logo. And they have advertised the fact that they are now using robots in their warehouse. And they're celebrating this idea. We now have robots in our warehouse, so therefore we're going to offer you a sale 10% off because we've got robots. Yeah? So how much capital have they employed? Then here, the profit levels of the business. And that's, could be huge, huge levels of profits, like the Coca-Colas of the world that make billions of dollars worth of profit. Or it could be other businesses that might only make a few thousand or a few hundred even. And then here it might be about the stock market value. So if they are listed on the stock market, you can actually find the information out. If you go to, say, like the New York Stock Exchange website, you can actually find out what's called stock market capitalization. And it will tell you a number. And that will be how much money they have basically got in the stock market, how many shares are listed in the stock market based on that company. Now, you might find statistics like these for your business, and that's one of the things I would actually like you to do. Okay, So turnover, employees, capital employed, profit, maybe stock market value. Now, they may not all apply to your business. Yeah? So turnover, which was sales. How many sales are they making per year? Employees. Again, how many? Sorry, got on a message. All right, how many employees? Capital employed. I mean, they say employed, we're talking about capital investment. All right, so how much? That might be quite hard to find out. How much? Sometimes if they're listed on the stock market, they might publish their finances basically online as a report, and you might be able to look through that and decipher what their capital investment levels are, but that's quite difficult to do. Right? So I'm not necessarily expecting you to be able to find that out. You might be able to find out about profit levels. Again, they can list those online. Right? How much profit do some of these businesses actually earn? And stock market value. Again, that's only going to apply, so stock market capitalization, that's only going to apply if they are listed in the stock market. So if your business isn't listed in the stock market, then you won't be able to find that information because they're not there. Right? So with that in mind, it's now your turn. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to work out, one, can you find information out? And again, it might be quite difficult for the business that you've chosen for your case study. Can you find out how many sales they make per year? Is a good metric. Do you know how many employees they have? Maybe they've got 2, 5, 10. You know. As said, capital investment, that's going to be quite difficult to find out. But what about the profit levels? Yeah. Now, sometimes if you're looking at a company like Apple, they can be a bit, I was going to say cagey. They can not necessarily always want you to know some of the numbers about them. So they might release, for example, an overall sales figure, so turnover figure, but they may not say how much of that is related to phones versus computers versus to watches. Sometimes they get a bit sensitive with regards to some of that information. You might still be able to find that out. And again, if they're in the stock market, what level of capitalization are you talking about for that business? So here's what I'd like you to do, is to go back into your case studies, do some research about this, see if you can find out these statistics. So you might need to unsubmit, right, your case study. Then you're going to add any and all information you can find out about size. And you might like to make a comment about the size. You know, if they've got 2 employees, then they're a small business, you would suggest. You know? You might be surprised and you might find that a business you thought was small actually has hundreds and hundreds of employees, therefore it's considered a big business, a large business, right? And you're going to add that information to your slides. Now, you've got time. I'd like you for the next bit of the lesson, that's what I want you to do, because some of that is quite difficult research to do. You'll need to unsubmit your case study, put this information into it, and then resubmit it. All right? Now, if you have any questions about that, if you're not sure about it, you can stay on at the end of the meet, or you could send me an email. Either way works. Otherwise, that's where I want us to finish today. I know we've got a weird week because we've had the 2 Thursdays, so you've missed a Tuesday, and I apologise for that, but that's okay. We will catch up. You don't need to panic about, oh, we're going to get behind. Don't worry. Right? So the other class has had 3 lessons this week, and you've had 1, but that doesn't mean you're going to fall behind. You really don't need to panic about that. Right? This is important because this is about giving you a case study, a real life example, one hopefully that you're interested in, that you're going to then be able to attach and apply a lot of these theories and ideas that we are coming to. All right, so that will help with your understanding, but it will also give you a case study that you can use in an exam, should you choose to. All right, where you'll be able to say, for example, for IKEA, blah, 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 yeah, that sort of an idea. Yeah. So again, these are your size metrics. All right. The slide about the sizes is in the slides, so that's on the website, so you'll be able to find that should you need it. Otherwise, this would say in the land of my birth, He Kōnera, and I will see you next week. I will post the recording of the lesson to the site so that you've got that. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David.
Bye. Any questions, anybody? Lancelot, have you got a question? Still in the meet, Lancelot.